Chiropractic, founded on tone by Theodore Schreiber, PhD, DC, Dean of Kansas State Chiropractic College in Wichita, Kansas. The article reads, the republication of D.D. Palmer's classic, The Chiropractors Adjuster, necessary as it was in helping to clarify a good number of present-day issues, may also lead to new confusions and misinterpretation as it already has. It would not be at all surprising if new factions would spring up within this or that camp of chiropractic thought. This is not necessarily an evil. Interpretations, unconsciously motivated by temperament, will always differ among humans, even if they were experts in one and the same field of endeavor. I'm going to pause right there because he asked me to throw any thoughts. If we just took that part right there to understand where we're at in chiropractic, oh my goodness, there you go. Continuing. The immediate great benefit to be derived from the availability of the Founders, capital F Founders book, is the possibility of becoming acquainted at first hand with his chiropractic, all caps, which until now was almost impossible. Makes sense. The book was published in 1910. It's kind of set aside, went through World War I, went through the Roaring 20s, the Great Depression of the 30s, World War II, the recovery from the Great Depression, getting into the 50s, the boom of the 50s, 1949. I can see why this wasn't paid much attention to through all that traumatic, tragic turmoil between 1910 and 1949. Which was almost impossible. The present-day student went through 4 years of training without ever having an inkling of this only authentic source book on original chiropractic. And how few teachers in our schools and colleges had ever taken a look into this work is anyone's guess. Unless they were advanced in years, the majority may be expected never to have had the opportunity to study it. This is also assuming that this source book is also the way Dr. Schreiber is writing it. This source book was his final work that written in stone and immutable, which that's up for discussion. But we'll continue reading. From the point of view of the teacher's preparation in our chiropractic schools or colleges, this is simply deplorable. Of course, we can assume the attitude that some subjects in the standard curriculum are independent, that anatomy is anatomy and is taught as such without reference to medicine, osteopathy, or chiropractic. From a pedagogical standpoint, this attitude is indefensible. Students are being deprived whenever a strictly scientific subject is not taught in reference to associated fields or in view of application, purpose, and even historical perspectives. I'm going to scroll down here. Departmentalization is one of the weaknesses of today's institutionalized education. Yes, absolutely across the board, doesn't matter what subject's being taught. The curse of over-specialization at the expense of an overall picture is growing into a national menace. Again, written 1949, here it is, 2020, absolutely spot on. Even back then, people were noticing this, but we just continued. As an example, one might take a paragraph from an article in the Scientific American which reads as follows. In biology and medicine, it is becoming increasingly difficult to see the forest for the trees. The specialization of modern research leads into ever-narrowing paths. One man spends an entire lifetime studying a single hormone, another an enzyme, another the circulation of the kidneys. Year by year, the data pile up. Yet, in some respects, this vast accumulation of facts is leading us no nearer to an understanding of the living organism as a whole. Biologists have pushed so far into their individual tunnels of exploration, there are so many tunnels, that the relation of one finding to another may elude discovery for years. Obviously, we have reached a point where it is highly desirable to widen the view, to conduct researches in breadth as well as in depth. This was written March 1949, page 20, Scientific. Oh my goodness, if we would just, again, take just this one part of this article written in 1949 and apply it today, where would we be at? That would be so wonderful. As Ecclesiastes says, there's nothing new under the sun. It hasn't been thought about before. just different dates, different people. The lack of historical perspective is one of our worst handicaps. Undoubtedly, the Chiropractors Adjuster, name of the book, will furnish a long-felt need for historical data to the newcomer to the profession. Some of the data will be startling. Some will be welcome. Others will be resented, or at least will be regretted for having appeared in print. Reorientation will be imperative. And understandable as all these and other reactions might be, the reappearance of this book is an historic event in itself. It is a sign of our growing up as a profession. More of us today can take it, regardless of all. It is a felicitous fact that we, at long last, can concentrate on ideas, analyze them, and categorize them. Too many among us speak and write without knowing what we're talking and writing about. Oh my goodness. Yes, absolutely. No person, no place, no position held must any longer be a noli me tangere or persona beatifica, respectively non grata. Those who put persons above principles are misfits wherever they are. Let me read that one again. Those who put persons above principles are misfits wherever they are. Let me read that again. Those who put persons above principles are misfits wherever, whatever, whenever, in whatever field they are. Sorry, that was, again, I'm just reacting to this. D.D. Palmer is no exception. Even those who feel a deep reverence for the old master do not follow him in everything. D.D. Palmer was only human, all too human at times. But the educated chiropractor, too, cannot be excused from knowing about this. Much critique could be offered and needs to be offered by to clear the ground for future policy and action. The title page of this book already offers opportunity for critical evaluation. Only one feature will be touched upon in this writing, talking about this article I'm reading. One phrase, a particular phrase, the last three words on the title page will be commented upon in this article. It reads, founded on tone. Many a question presents itself. What does it mean? What does tone, tissue tone, mean? What does, quote, founded on tone, end quote, mean? Can a diagnosis be based on tone? Can and should, and to what extent should a healing branch be based on tone? Are there more reliable ways and means to ascertain tissue conditions? If it was a best possible means of analysis or diagnosis in 1895, 1906, 1910 in chiropractic, must it be maintained? And if so, why? Can it be, and if so, would it be superseded and settled intelligently, authoritatively by discussion openly and frankly? It would show us up as professionally matured. Scrolling down here. Does the idea founded on tone express a chiropractic principle? D.D. Palmer decidedly says that it does. Would that mean that if abandoned, chiropractic would lose something essential or peculiar to it? Is the very idea new and is not found to be new? Have we, and had D.D. Palmer, the right to claim it as a basic chiropractic idea? Can anything be called chiropractic today because someone thinks he has got something new, even if it existed before, was practiced by others long ago, or contemporaneously under a different name? Is the hypothesis, theory, principle, concept, idea of muscle tone, nerve tone, arterial tone, etc., a chiropractic discovery? We have read much about dual robbery to the effect that chiropractic stole osteopathy, osteopathy stole chiropractic, and then both stole medicine. And now that medicine is stealing chiropractic. What are the facts about all this? Side note, the 1949 guys, even back then, this stuff was going on. We need to, realize it. It's not a new fight. It's an old fight, generations old, and it's still happening. That tone, as such, is not a hypothesis or theory, but a physiological fact, needs no comment. What it meant to D.D. Palmer and his chiropractic How he worked it out and into his system is well discoursed throughout his book. Other questions previously raised will not be answered here at this time in this article. Instead, the result of a bit of historical search will be offered. The reader is referred to an article in the December issue of 1946 in which the writer stated what was indisputably original with chiropractic. This can, and must, my side note, be reiterated today. Let it be emphasized that D.D. Palmer's ideas about tissue tone are not original with him. He himself does not claim originality for the idea and diagnostic value based on the degree of tone found in tissues. Its relation and reciprocal relation existing between states of mind and conditions of health and the tonicity of body tissues has been observed for centuries. As early as 1669, a W. Simpson wrote about keeping, quote, up the right tone of membranous parts. So about keeping up the right tone of the membranous parts, end quote. There may have been earlier observers of the significance of tone. A book on health exercise published in 1704 definitely advises exercise affects the solids by restoring the true tone of the parts. In 1780, the Mirror, in its 86th issue, reported, quote, of sovereign efficacy in restoring debilitated stomachs to their proper tone, end quote. In 1802, it was said that by alternate exercise and indulgence, limbs acquire firmest tone of health and vigor, end quote. In the splendid Treatise on Physiology and Hygiene, a book expressly written, quote, for educational institutions and general readers, fully illustrated by Joseph C. Hutchinson, M.D., New York, 1873, end quote, we read as follows, start quote, a healthful reflex activity produces an elasticity or tone, in quotes, of the voluntary muscular system, which, in great measure, explains the existence in the young and vigorous a feeling of buoyancy and reserve power. Shivering from cold and trembling from fear may, in part, be referred to a temporary loss of tone, resulting from a powerful impression upon the brain, end quote. In a most astonishing work entitled Orthopraxy, the Mechanical Treatment of Deformities, Debilities, and Deficiencies of the Human Frame, by Henry Heather Bigg, London, 1877, the following sentence occurs on page 161. A time comes when, from the defective resiliency of the ligaments and the want of tone in the muscles, the spinal column yields in the direction of the particular bend to which it is habitually subjected, loses to a greater or lesser extent its natural curves. Interesting. That was mine. That wasn't from the article. Dr. S.V. Clevenger, who was well familiar with 19th century literature on the spinal column in reference to its importance in health and disease, speaks in his work on comparative physiology and psychology from Chicago in 1884 of the physiology of vascular tonus and the reestablishment of tonicity. He makes it plain that proper vascular tone generates health. To the degree that the tone is lowered, life itself as an integrated function is lowered, at least in parts of the body. Here's a pull quote. Let E, a given active point, demand repair. Lowering the tonus at that point to zero, then the remaining tonus of all fails. Here it is appropriate to quote from D.D. Palmer's famous line, life is the expression of tone, in page 7. This should make surface anatomy and palpation of the living body one of our most expert studies and skills. Amen, amen, amen. It also goes without further ado that other means than chiropractic adjustments do restore tone to parts of the body. J. Payne, in 1888, advocated a douche in order to restore tone. And as early as 1820, our own Washington Irving wrote in his sketchbook that hearty exercises produces also a healthy tone of mind and spirits. Tone was herewith even applied to the field of psychology. This much the reader will have gathered from these few passages that tone, tonus, resiliency of living tissue have been observed and evaluated in terms of disease and degrees of vitality and health. We are thus led to believe that D.D. Palmer was on solid ground in making the statement, I added that, tone, the basic principle of chiropractic. In this respect, physiological tone received a new significance. We must remember that rentgenology was just born, and its application, the exception for some years to come. Again, he's referring to the 1910 date of the book that the author of this article is referring to. Granted that it is one of the greatest aids and at times indispensable for determining the approximate degree of osseous and ligamentous pathology in the chiropractic office, it is also true that the spinograph in particular has led many practitioners away from a time-honored bioptic and tactile means of examination. Many among us never have learned to examine the human figure kinesthetically at all, a diagnostic procedure so telling of ankylosis and other conditions. And what about determining the specific andriatric and or gynaeatric characteristics to be apparent in other male or female patients, and in spite of and contrary to the more obvious primary genitalia? So that's talking about soft tissue aberrations. Yet these are only some of the more prominent aspects to be considered, so grossly neglected in modern chiropractic. One does not need to look far for explanations, and I will revisit this one here in a little bit. One thing is certain, the profession has failed to explore chiropractic from the chiropractic point of view. I'm going to read that one again just for emphasis. One thing is certain, the profession, chiropractic profession, has failed to explore the furthest reaches of chiropractic from the chiropractic point of view. In other words, i.e., to examine the architecture of the human framework phylogenetically as a rafter and pillar, and anthropologically as to its racial and sexual dominance. Interesting. Tone plays its part in all this. Many of us have gone astray under all sorts of pretense, but without real reason. Machine age medicine could very well have been written for us too. And that was from the American Scientist, October 1947, which was just 2 years prior to this article. Back to the article. D.D. Palmer's central doctrine of tone was well founded. He even had a medical forerunner in the 18th century, and no less a man than G.E. Stahl, erstwhile professor of pathology, dietetics, physiology, botany, pharmacology at the University of Halle. Teachers in those days knew practically everything there was to be known of and about their professional learning. Knowledge was not as specialized and narrow as it is now, but was broad and comprehensive. Professor Stahl counted among his 300 publications the Theoria Medica Vera of 1707, that is to say, the true healing principle. And what was that principle? Here it is. The anima provokes movements in the organs, and life depends on movement. For any disturbance of their coordination results in atonic movements. This, however, is the loss of tonic movements and disease. Astonishingly simple, is it not? But what is the anima? We refrain from speculating here. It would lead us into metaphysics, and chiropractic is still ill from this adolescent attribute in many, many quarters. History conceals many surprises. Here, however, it is a little more revealing. Professor Stahl had a worthy colleague in Friedrich Hoffmann, who published among many other works his Medicina Rationalis Systematica in 9 volumes that appeared during the years 1718 to 1740. In 1740, Professor Hoffmann of Halle was 80 years old, and he lived for 2 more years without any wonder drugs, without any $300 chiropractic techniques. $300 chiropractic techniques in 1949? Now, what did this rational medical system principally promulgate? What is the author's place in the history of health as a thinker and doctor? The following excerpt is taken from History of Medicine by the Italian refugee scholar Arturo Castiglione, who speaks of Professor Friedrich Hoffmann as, and this is a pull quote, the creator of an influential system of medicine reposing on mechanistic foundation. Force is inherent in matter and manifests itself by mechanical movements that can be determined by measurements, numbers, weights. In the living organism, also, the vital forces are manifested in this way. Life is nothing but movement, and death is a cessation of movement. The living organism is entirely formed of fibers, having a special characteristic, tonus, with the ability to contract and dilate. The tonus of the fibers is stimulated or regulated through the nervous system by a nerve ether. This fluid has its seat in the brain, whence it is transported to all organs of the body by systole and diastole of the meninges. When the tonus is normal, the body is healthy. Every modification of the tonus bringing with it a disturbance of health. Fever has its origin in the spinal cord. Treatment should be according to the case and to the necessity of stimulating or quieting the tonus of the fibers. That was written in 1740. Anyway, in other words, D.D. Palmer's central thesis about health and morbid tissues, particularly nerves too tense or too slack, belated as it was, nevertheless was, at one time or another, worthy of investigation by one of the best brains in the heart of healing. Dr. Castiglione also asks us not to forget his, Professor Hoffmann's, recognition of the importance of the nervous system in disease, which led him to attribute to the nervous system, for the first time in medical history, a role of prime importance in the vital functions of the body. It is to the credit of D.D. Palmer that this attitude also became a cornerstone in his philosophy of health and disease over 50 years ago, again, written in 1949. The experimental findings of the Speransky School, as published periodically in the Zeitschrift für Experimentelle Medicine. Oh my goodness, I even studied German. That's why I like to read these things first. In the late 20s, is only now becoming known through the American collective edition under the name A Basis for the Theory of Medicine, Speransky. So ably commented upon, first by Dr. Kelly years ago, and more recently by several other alert chiropractors in the Journal, which is where this article was published. In conclusion, a word from the founder, D.D. Palmer, from the book that this article is about. Page 971, the conclusion. Tone is a foundation upon which, as a basic principle, I have built my science. From tone originate all the principles which constitute the science and philosophy of chiropractic. I find so many themes here that are still so prevalent in our struggle to understand our own identity as chiropractors. I appreciate Dr. Schreiber pulling the history of assessment technologies in. One of the things that also came along in the 1920s was thermography, NCM. Then way after this article, Titronics came in. Those are the two original assessment tools, technology that are chiropractics to claim. If I remember my history correct, chiropractic was the first profession to adopt radiology into the healing arts. We have tended to, as humans, rely on technology to solve our problems, laying aside relying on technology, laying aside rational thinking and rational thought, and broader thought, as this article says, to evaluate where we are in the world, how we fit, or do we fit. I like my chiropractic to be unmixed. I like my chiropractic to be separate and distinct. But we still exist in the same existence as the other healing arts. To not be aware of tone in the systems of the body is absurd. I think anybody, even the most technologically advanced chiropractor that relies a lot on non-physical, non-human assessment, to ignore that fact questions either their veracity or their observational skills. Constantly dealing with a body in motion and that motion is only created by the push and pull, mostly the pull of tissues, and the tugging and the stretching and the moving and the fluids and stuff. It's just obvious. It was obvious even, back in again, with the 1400s, 1500s, 1600s. I am glad that this piece of history was found. I'm glad that the 1910 Chiropractors Adjuster was published. I'm glad that Dr. Schreiber wrote this article explaining a little bit more about the foundational premise upon the book and upon DD's philosophy and science of chiropractic. I see it throughout what I've read of B.J. Palmer's theories and practice as well. It stayed there, even though DD and BJ seem to have parted ways at some points. I think the core is there. I think we've added layers upon layers of complexity upon it. We've industrialized it. We definitely have done that. That's one of the things that this article points out. Even in 1949, the industrialization of healthcare, of health, the industrialization of education. Industry is invaluable in producing industrious things. It's not very valuable when it takes over human things, in my opinion.